Welcome to What Really Matters podcast, Everyday Spirituality with Karen Wyatt. And I just want to thank you for joining me here again today. This is the third episode of the relaunched podcast since I've kind of revived it and brought it back to life here, which I'm so very happy about and so glad that I'm still here and I can be here to continue to share some of the wisdom that has come into my life for many, many years now, but also particularly over the last year and a half when I've been on quite a journey myself. And I'll talk about that from time to time. I did mention it when I talked about my heart a couple of episodes ago. So it will come up from time to time because there are ongoing lessons I'm learning through all of this process. And it inspires me so much to want to share this information with you because I see many people out there who are struggling and suffering and trying to understand, why is life like this? And is this normal? And does my life make sense? Or is something wrong with me or with the way I'm living my life? That things just keep happening and life keeps going off in strange directions. And I just want to share from my vantage point where I am now after all the years I've been alive, how I've kind of changed my thinking about my own life over the years and how I've made peace with these crazy human lives that we live and the various detours and obstacles that we meet along the way. And also, I guess, the miracles and the beauty and the love and the joy that I've been able to discover even during some of the times of greatest suffering. So that is just so important to me that I share these messages because I find hope in them, and I hope that you do too. I hope that if you are struggling and trying to find your way through something right now, maybe something I share will have some value for you, and that's my goal and my intent. So in today's episode, I'm going to be talking about the 7 lessons from the dying, a spiritual path for these times. These are the lessons that I wrote about in my book, which was initially, when it first came out in 2012, called What Really Matters. And so that's the title of this podcast. And the subtitle was 7 Lessons for Living from the Stories of the Dying. And this book has been republished now by Watkins Publishing in the UK under the title 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying. So 7 lessons. Anyway, the point is the book contains 7 lessons. These are lessons that I personally learned during my years of working in hospice as I sat at the bedside with patients and their families who were facing death, but also looking at life through the lens of death. This is the valuable perspective that I found from them. They were at the very end of life, so they were no longer trying to project themselves into the future and thinking about, what else will I do with my life? They were accepting the fact that this is the end of my life, and I want to reconsider and review my whole life and what I've learned and what that's been like for me. And as I listened to all of their stories, certain patterns began to emerge. I took notes, I wrote in my journal. I really listened because many times patients said to me, I just learned this about life. I just came to understand this. And the fact that I'm dying now is how I learned this and how I figured that out. I knew that was very significant. I knew these are pearls of wisdom that I need to pay attention to. So I wrote them down. I wrote them in my notes. And over again, I saw many of the same patterns. People were working on the same lessons, learning the same things. And so in the book, I told a lot of stories of patients that I encountered, how these lessons seem to come up for them in their lives, how they taught the lesson to me. In my next book, The Journey from Ego to Soul, I write about how I actually learned to live those 7 lessons. But in this episode, I just want to review the lessons themselves. In my book, 7 Lessons for Living, the lessons are presented in a certain order, the order in which I really learned them, kind of like stair steps. But for the purpose of this episode, I want to reverse the order, just so you know that. If you look at the book, it will be the opposite of how I present these lessons today. But there's a reason for that. And so I will explain that to you. But the point is that the lessons, they're not linear. They are, if anything, a spiral that goes up and down. And so it isn't that you begin with one lesson and you work your way through all 7. It's that you begin wherever you begin and you go up and down the spiral continuously. And so you learned something today, but you may go back to earlier lessons and relearn some of those and then come back to today's lesson and rework on that, and it gets shaped more, it gets deepened for you. And so it's hard to present them in any sort of linear or chronological order because that is not how you learn them. As I said, you go up and down the spiral, and you may jump from one thing to another and then return to it again and go back and forth. And it's really just, these lessons come from how life unfolds for you and whatever life brings you. But I'll explain the reason that I want to do these in reverse order today is because in the last episode, I was emphasizing the type of spirituality that we need right now is death-aware spirituality that incorporates our mortality and even puts that right up front. We are all going to die. Life is short. This is fleeting. This spirituality is to help us in this moment as we're dealing with that reality. Our spirituality needs to also be ego aware and acknowledge the presence of ego, and also recognize the tricks of the ego and know how the ego operates for each one of us, because the goal is to activate our higher selves, our higher consciousness, which can help us manage the ego and not let the ego be the driver of our lives. So it's important that we have ego knowledge, and we'll be talking about that in upcoming episodes. And I've talked about it in past episodes. You can go back in the archives and you'll find quite a few episodes about ego. And then third, our spirituality has to be rooted in love. Love is the number one thing that really matters for us. So, I am presenting these lessons in reverse order partly because we begin with this death awareness that I'm talking about. And I think it is happening right now. I see it in our society in many ways. People are waking up to death sometimes because at young ages, people are getting terminal diagnoses, and at an age long before their bodies are aging, which would cause them to start to turn toward death and look at it, they're having to face the possibility of the end of life with a very serious terminal diagnosis. And so many people at younger ages are becoming aware of death. And this is important and a very valuable step for all of us. But it is the lessons in reverse order I'm going to talk to you about today begin with impermanence and with this idea of accepting death. And so I want to start there because for many people, that is the crisis they're facing right now, accepting death for themselves, for a loved one, just seeing death around us in the world, and just being aware that life is fleeting and short, and we're holding it in our hands and it's slipping away in every moment. So again, I want to emphasize, when I talk about spirituality, it is not based in any religion, and there's no dogma. There's only insights and only hopefully some inspirations that may help you to do your own search, to find things that have meaning to you and that matter to you in your life. So I'm not suggesting any type of religious practice. I'm simply talking about your spiritual nature, you as a spiritual being in a physical body, and how you choose to live your life and things you may want to focus on and think about. And again, as I talk about these 7 lessons, I'm not saying that they may all apply to you or any of them apply to you. They're my lessons that I learned, and I'm sharing it as encouragement for you to find your lessons and to begin to note the stories, the patterns that repeat themselves in your life so that you can put together what really matters to you and what is most important to you to focus on. So I share my journey in hopes that it inspires yours in some way, but not because I'm saying this is the only journey and this is the way it has to be, just that this is how things have unfolded for me. So I'm going to start with first of all, with what is typically the last lesson of the 7 lessons, but I'm going to start with it first, the lesson of impermanence. Impermanence meaning nothing lasts and everything changes. And this is true throughout the universe. It is a law of the universe and a pattern of the universe. Even galaxies and stars and planets die one day. Nothing material in existence will last. Everything will eventually fall apart. And that has been built into our existence. It's built into our DNA. And as much as people may wish that we could reverse that or change that, I don't really believe that it's possible or that it's wise. I think that the idea that life is short and fleeting is actually what gives it deep value and meaning. It makes every single moment precious. So this idea of facing the fact that I just don't have very much time here, it's going by quickly, I've got to make the most of everything, that's a great impetus for a spiritual journey and for deepening yourself and for going inward and looking at what is inside of you. And impermanence, the awareness of impermanence is what we need in order to tolerate change. And if anything, we are in a time of tremendous change right now all around us. Everything around us is in flux. Things are shifting and changing. And we may not even be able to keep up with the pace of it sometimes. We may develop change fatigue, in fact, because so many things are changing. Things we used to think were solid in our lives that we could rely upon, they're dissolving away from us. Things are in flux and shifting. And so I talked before about all the societal changes happening around us, but our relationships are likely changing. We may feel ourselves changing. Things that we used to enjoy or that used to delight us, sometimes even just 6 months ago, may all feel different now. The world may look different and feel different to us because we're in a time of powerful transition in one way or another. And so we are at that point. I may have mentioned this in the last episode where the caterpillar spins the cocoon and begins to dissolve inside the cocoon, where we're dissolving inside our cocoon here, and we don't know what's going to emerge on the other side of it. All we know is that things are changing quickly and rapidly, and this is our evidence of impermanence, that nothing is lasting that's around us. Everything is changing and shifting. And so we need to build up our resilience for tolerating change and tolerating the dissolution of things that we used to care about and used to rely upon. And so some of these lessons, as we get deeper and deeper, help us create a stable foundation because, spoiler alert, I'll give you the hint right now, the one thing that does last is love. That's why this is a love-rooted, love-focused spirituality, because love is the one thing, if you cultivate genuine, deep spiritual love within yourself, that's the one thing that you can anchor yourself to that does not change. So one more qualifier. Romantic love may change because relationships change and our feelings about relationships, but I'm talking about something far deeper than that. It is the creative force of the universe when I talk about love that doesn't change. So again, this lesson of impermanence is important because it helps us navigate change, and change is happening rapidly all around us. And something to reflect upon is this question: what are you clinging to that is already dissolving? Are you aware of things in your own life that are shifting right before your eyes right now and dissolving away? And that brings us to the next lesson, which is the lesson of surrender, because when we are in a time of such great change, so much slipping away from us, so much happening all at once, our only choice really is to surrender to it, is to go with the flow of it, because we do not have control. We can't control the changes that are happening. As much as our egos would like to have control over life, that may be one of the most disturbing elements of the change that's happening, is that we can't control it. We can't stop it. So we are in a place where we have to accept that certain things are just happening. They're beyond our control. And the moment we stop trying to control is the moment we free up more of our energy for being creative and for coming up with creative ways to respond to changes that are happening in our lives. The more our egos dictate that we try to control things, we try to stop something, we try to make it be different than it is, the more we can kind of spin in a circle and waste our energy. So at this moment, discernment is very important. Are there things you can change? And there may be, and if you're aware, if I get involved with this movement, if I do this, if I donate money, if I speak up, if I start this hobby, if I do something, I could change something in my life that I'm not happy about right now. And yes, if you can change it, if there are things in your control, do those, pursue those, but be able to recognize the things that you cannot change that are happening regardless of how you feel about it, regardless of the steps that you take. And let's use climate change as an example, because in the big picture, right now, each one of us individually cannot stop some of the changes that are happening to our climate. What we can control and do, however, is in how we live our lives day to day, and we contribute our small portion to trying to stabilize and heal our environment and our planet. But we have to let go of the idea that we have to somehow control what's happening. We can only control what we do, our own behavior in our own lives. So stop trying to control the big picture of it. Control how you behave and how you show up and how you act in the world. That is what you do have control over. So with this idea of surrender, we're trying to convince the ego to let go of its big ideas about stopping change from happening in our lives, and to learn how to go with the flow a little bit. Because the more we are able to surrender and go with the flow, as I said, that's when we free up our energy for creativity. And we may get new ideas for something powerful that we could do or write or say or commit ourselves to that would make a significant difference. And so there's this middle ground. There's this razor's edge, I guess, as some people describe it, where we want to be balanced, that we're not being pulled off by our despair over the changes that we don't like that are happening and trying too much to control them, or pulled into apathy where we just give up and don't care and don't engage anymore. We want to be in the middle and stay engaged, but have just the sharpest discernment so that we don't waste our energy on causes that we cannot make an impact on, that we can't make a difference, and place our energy where it will make a difference. And what I believe is our intuition can tell us where we need to put our energy if we learn how to listen to it. So the ego is likely to drive us toward trying to control and trying to stop things and wasting a lot of our energy and time. But our higher selves, through our intuition, will give us those nudges toward things where we really could make a difference. So this is the lesson of surrender. It's tough. And again, the idea is that we go with the flow. We let go of trying to control things, but we don't give up. We don't become apathetic. We don't stop caring. We bring all of our care and concern, all of our passion with us, but we fine tune it so that we know we're putting it to the very best use it can have, and we're letting go of all the other things that we simply have no effect upon. We can't make a difference in. And so a question to reflect upon for this lesson of surrender is, where am I being asked to yield rather than push? I think those are two good words to keep in mind. Yielding to something, which is like the surfer on the surfboard, yielding to the wave, rather than trying to push or force something. And then this brings us to the next lesson, which is the lesson of purpose, and looking at, in a deep way, what am I doing here? Why am I here? And in the last episode, I talked about this, the saying that we're not physical beings having a spiritual experience, we're spiritual beings having a human experience. We are here to experience life, this life in a human body, facing all the challenges of being human, but also all the blessings and the joys and the beauty of being human. And that is why we are here. But I also believe that we each carry with us, I think of it this way, an outer purpose and an inner purpose. And our outer purpose is often what we spend the first half of our lives working on. I talked about that in the last episodes, the outward arc. And it's the first half of life. We put all of our energy and effort into education, gaining knowledge, choosing a career, putting forth effort, accumulating some material things, finding stability in life, creating a family and a home. And these are all part of our external purpose, which is a big reason why we're here. That is the avenue for a lot of important learning for our lives, our external purpose, and how we negotiate all these various stages of life as we become adults and as we find our way and find our place. But we also have an inner purpose, and this is what we discover when we go within on the inward arc and begin to turn toward our own spiritual growth. We come to understand what am I doing here in terms of an inner purpose? What am I here to learn about? What is my soul here to learn about and to pursue? And it's very different oftentimes than the outer purpose. And though I think we can, our soul can learn, we can work on our inner purpose through our careers, through our jobs. They often bring us all of the fuel for growth of our inner selves. But it's important that we begin to recognize that we have this inner life, we have a higher self, we have an inner being that is looking for different things in life than material success and career success. So as soon as we can acknowledge that, we can keep pursuing our outer world, our outer success, but we also start to pay attention to our inner life. And that's what this whole conversation is about, turning inward and looking at, how do I help myself grow spiritually so that I can become a deeper, more thoughtful person, and so that I see the higher consciousness values of life, the things that really do matter. And so once we recognize that we have an inner purpose, it kind of changes everything, because we start to try to figure out what that is and to try to understand it. For me personally, I'll tell you that when I was 16, I had an epiphany moment that came to me, kind of a powerful moment. And it was actually after one of my classmates died when I was in high school. And I started to wonder, like, what are we here for? If we can die when we're 16 years old, what is the purpose of that? And that's when I first got an inkling. There are other things that we can learn, that we could learn in even the shortest lifetime. And the epiphany that came to me was love, which I talk about all the time. But it came to me that my inner purpose is to learn how to love as deeply as possible, as widely as possible, but also how to be loved and how to receive love. So I'm not saying that's everyone's inner purpose. That's, for me, the realization that I had. And I've heard other people talk about their inner purpose is to find joy. And some others have said peace is what their inner life is about. And so I think each of us has to go on that little journey to discover that and to have our epiphany moment of what is it that I am here to learn about. And it could be that it's one of these 7 lessons that I'm talking about that will be where your inner self says, focus on this. This is what I want to know more about and experience. It could be, and it might be something entirely different that is your inner purpose. But once you wake up to it and recognize, I also have an inner purpose, it actually helps you sometimes negotiate those changes in your external life, because you may face disappointments. Things may not work out the way you wanted them to in your outer life, as far as your job or things you had hoped to accomplish and achieve. But when you can turn back and say, okay, but what's my inner purpose doing during this time? It might be that that's exactly that disappointment in your external world is what is helping you learn the inner lesson that you came here to learn. It may be in service of your inner purpose. So when you're aware of your inner purpose, things start to make more sense in your life. You start to have a deeper recognition of how things are connected, and perhaps why events that appear negative or bad in the moment could actually have some sort of a blessing or something positive within them for you to learn from. So this inner purpose idea is it is the idea that helps you see you can use almost anything that happens in your life as an opportunity to grow and to learn something. And when you reach that point, that's a very good place to be. That really helps you with equanimity and be at peace. So that's looking at your inner and outer purpose. And something to reflect upon is one question is, what legacy am I living today? Or how am I serving my inner purpose through what I'm doing today? The next lesson that follows after that is the lesson of presence, which means to be able to be in the present moment. And this is a profound lesson the dying patients I talked to taught me. I was amazed when I sat with them and I recognized their ability to appreciate and savor the tiniest moments of life in ways that I had never experienced before. I was always either regretting the past or worrying about the future, and had so much trouble holding myself and holding steady in the present moment. But I found myself sitting with patients who had nothing but the present moment. And in their presence, I was able to experience my own presence. I was able to find stillness and sit with them. And for the first time, encounter what it feels like in me to be fully there in one place with one person, having an experience in the moment. So literally, my dying patients taught me how to be present. And it was such a valuable lesson and something I needed so desperately in my life. And I still work on it all the time, because it's not something you learn in one day. It's actually a practice of a lifetime to practice Returning always to the present moment, pulling your thoughts back from the past or the future, wherever they're wandering right now to this moment. Just be here with a calm breath and take in everything that this present moment offers. And it is a rich practice. And honestly, when you are fully present, you create a luminous moment, out of one single second, one single breath becomes deep and powerful and meaningful. And this is one of the ways that you can create a meaningful life, even when you're at the very end of life, even when you have only a few days or a few breaths left. By being fully present, you imbue each moment with such depth and meaning and beauty that it becomes something significant and amazing and wonderful. And so presence is something, again, as I say, most of us will probably work on for all of our lives, trying to learn how to be present and how to return to presence, because we will fall out of it over and over again. But you need to know about it and be aware of it in order to start practicing it. So that's one reason I talk about it. And your inner purpose that we just talked about will thrive in the present moment. So the more you're able to be fully present, the more you'll be able to look within yourself and see, what is it that I'm learning right now? What is it that I'm working on? They go hand in hand, and it's very powerful. And so the reflection that goes along with this lesson, the lesson of presence, is, can I be here fully just as I am? The next lesson after presence, I'm sorry, I'm kind of going over our usual time, but these are important that we get all these in. The next lesson is forgiveness. And forgiveness is probably the most common lesson I saw my patients working on. How do I forgive other people for things they did to me? How do I find forgiveness from them for things I did to them? How do I forgive myself? How do I forgive God? How do I forgive life for unfolding the way it did? And forgiveness is such a powerful practice. And you literally cannot get to higher consciousness if you're not able to practice forgiveness, because without forgiveness, you will be anchored deeply in your soul, inside yourself. You will be anchored deeply in the past to regret and bitterness and anger. And they hold you down. They hold you back from growing to be your highest self and your best self. So it is important to start doing forgiveness work and forgiveness practice to release all of that regret and bitterness that's being held inside. Sometimes the hardest person to forgive is yourself. Sometimes you have to start with the easier things that you can let go of, and start practicing what it's like to forgive. And maybe, you forgive the driver that cut you off on the freeway yesterday. Maybe you start there with something that feels a little simpler, and you work your way down and you go deeper and deeper. And again, forgiveness has to be a lifelong practice as well. Something that it works really well to journal about forgiveness, because you can write out your feelings. When you see them in writing, sometimes you recognize, you know what, I just don't need to hold on to that. I don't need to ruin my life over that thing that I've been holding all this bitterness about for years. I don't need to hold that anymore. So journaling can be a really powerful way to forgive. And it takes a lot of practice and a lot of work to do it, though sometimes you can have powerful awakenings that let you release a lot of blame and guilt very quickly if you really start working on it. And so the reflection that goes with forgiveness is, who or what needs release in my heart today? Name just one thing or one person or one event that it comes to the top of your mind, and start there. And how can I work toward forgiveness for that person or that event right now? And then following our work on forgiveness is the lesson of love. And again, love is what endures. Love is what persists and lasts through change. Love does not die. Love is actually the creative force of the universe. I think love is the energy that created everything in existence, including us. And when we die, we dissolve into love. And so genuine spiritual love is something that we already have. We already have it within us. We just may not understand it or recognize it because we're made of love. But it requires, I guess, an awareness and an acknowledgement and recognition of love in order to begin to see it. And so love is really the core teaching of all of these. And for me, it's the core of my life, trying to learn about love and learn how to love. And life has given me so many opportunities to learn about love in various ways, loving in difficult situations. And just trying to love myself has been a huge task, a huge undertaking, still working on that. And so in the end, love is all that matters. And the reflection to ask ourselves is, how can I embody love even during difficult times? That's something to ask yourself and to begin to work on. And I use it as kind of a yardstick in a way in every situation. Is there a way I can bring more love? What is the more loving choice? And how can I bring more love into this situation? And we'll talk a lot about love because it's such an important subject. It will come up over and over again. And then the final lesson that we'll talk about today is the lesson of suffering itself. And suffering is actually the entry point for most people into a spiritual journey. Often something falls apart. We get sick or injured or abandoned, or we have a loss that we're grieving, and suffering triggers us onto our spiritual path. So many of us may be in that place right now where it's suffering that actually got us started on this journey. And so most of the time, suffering is the beginning of the journey. That's where we find ourselves. But it's easy to get stuck in our suffering. And one of the reasons I wanted to talk about the other lessons is because sometimes when we're thinking about how to grow spiritually, it's almost easier to start with a different lesson first, because when we get in the middle of our suffering, it's heavy and it's painful and it pulls us down, and we can ruminate a lot on, why did this happen to me? Did I do something wrong? Why is this happening? And we can get stuck in the suffering for a long time. And so to become aware of the other lessons and think about the other lessons may be a way to help us through our suffering. Actually, all of these lessons are there at the same time, and we're working on all of them at the same time, whether we're aware of it or not. But so in a way, it doesn't really even matter what order we talk about them in, only that it's a recording and I have to talk about one after another. So this is the order that I've chosen today. But I just want to acknowledge that for most of us, suffering is real, and suffering may be the thing that has awakened us, the thing that pulled the rug out from under us, that made us see, whoa, this is what life is like. This is heavy, this is tough, and I don't know how I'm going to get through it. So that's a rough place to be in life. And I want you to know, if you are at that place, that you are not alone. But in some ways, you have been called to a spiritual path. If you're suffering right now, you've been called, you've been given an opportunity. There are things you could learn. There are places this suffering journey may take you that might change everything, and ultimately for the better, that will deepen you, that will broaden your horizons, that will elevate you to to your higher self and your higher consciousness, but it takes time and it takes support. And so that's really what this podcast is about, is trying to offer the support that people need wherever they are on this spiritual journey. If they're right in the midst of suffering and feeling stuck there and anchored there, that maybe something I say will help something shift and be a slight lift for them. And wherever you find yourself, I'm hoping that one of these lessons I mentioned today will resonate with you and be something that you decide, I'm going to think about that for a while. I'll take that to my heart and I will think about that for the next week or so. And so these 7 lessons together create, I guess we could call it a soul map in a way, that is really relevant right now for all the changes that we're going through in the world. And again, it's not a linear map, and it's a spiraling map that you go up and down, but it is a map of sorts. It does have these landmarks. It does have these signs along the way, signposts that help you think about, what could I work on right now? Maybe I could work on some forgiveness. Maybe I could just try and be more present by learning how to take some deep breaths. And so my goal is that you will find support. You'll recognize yourself and where you are on your journey, or whatever is most resonant with you in these words that I say. In future episodes, I'll come back and we'll revisit each one of these lessons separately, and a lot of other things too that I have found bring hope and growth and wisdom and understanding into my life. And so I wanted to mention that this is a path. It's a long path. It's a lifelong path. And wherever you are on the path is okay. Please be gentle with yourself, and please focus on just loving yourself where you are. You haven't done anything wrong. You're not doing it wrong. You just are where you are, and that's okay. And there are a lot of us out here who are on the path someplace or another, going through it with you. I hope that you'll come back for future episodes where I'll share more wisdom. I wanted to mention there is a little handout with journaling prompts that's available for soul supporters on my Patreon page. If you go to patreon.com/EOLU on the soul supporters tier, every week I'm going to leave some sort of a handout or journaling prompt and reflections, or some sort of activity that you can do relevant to that week's episode. So you can check that out on the Patreon page if you're interested, and that's the Soul Supporter tier. And also, I write about some of these topics on a Substack page called the Soul Code, and I'll leave links for that, for the Patreon page and the Soul Code page, in case you're interested in any of my writings. And again, all of these lessons came from my book, 7 Lessons for Living from the 7 Lessons for Living from the Dying, How to Nurture What Really Matters. I forgot the new title from the new publisher. Thanks again for being here with me for this long talk today. I didn't mean to go so far over time, but there was a lot to cover. And until the next time, remember that we're here for love. So face your fear. Be ready for whatever life brings you next, and love each and every moment of your very precious life. Bye-bye.